So tell me, what do you say regarding someone who has what we would call bad manners or bad behavior, or maybe has the wrong choice of words? What would you say about such people? We oftentimes, of course, say that they have a bad character. But actually, for me, other than looking at it like bad character, I like preferring to it as having conflict in their identity. Because I believe each and every one of us would want primarily to be a good person, to have good character, to be at our best. But actually, what I've noticed is when we have faulty identity, when we have picked up false identities along the way in our lives, then this ends up bringing a lot of conflict within our lives, in our own identity, and therefore we end up assuming other identities which are not primarily and originally our identity. And as a result of this, because of the conflict that is happening in our lives, we end up choosing behaviors that are actually unacceptable. For example, in this case, we may have someone who drinks too much. Now, oftentimes, there could be so many reasons why people drink. And I think it's important we understand that. There could be so many reasons why people drink. So it's not necessarily about the identity. However, the key thing, the reason why people are addicted is simply because of their identity. And this is what I mean. For example, you're growing up, you're having a father who doesn't love you, who doesn't show you any kind of attention. And so growing up, you're already growing up with an emptiness that is within in your heart. And so as you grow up, what you're doing is you're looking for attention, for someone who can love you. And when you don't meet people who really genuinely and honestly love you, you try to find ways of filling that gap. Because when you get loved, it's just like someone who is high on something. So when you go out there and try some alcohol or some other chemicals, and then they tend to make you feel good, then at the end of it, what happens is that you have to constantly go for that chemical so that you can fill up that gap. Obviously, the gap itself is not filled up, because that gap is a gap that can only be filled up by love. And because you're not getting love from the substance that you're taking, then what happens is you have to constantly keep on taking until to a point that you get entirely addicted. We have also seen people who have sexual behaviors, and most of them, for example, I can give example of ladies. You notice that they are looking for a man who can genuinely, honestly love them, and because maybe they never got attention from their father. And remember, the expectation as a child growing up is that my father is supposed to be a loving father, someone who protects, someone who provides. That is the concept that a child has in mind. But when there is conflict into that, it causes the conflict of identity. Like the identity of that child is already having conflict, and so this child looks for the love of the father through and through wherever they go. Of course, you encounter some people who take advantage of you, and when you're taken advantage of and you don't feel fully loved, then you go look for another one and another one and another one, and then finally we begin to label people and try to say that they have a bad behavior, yet they are actually fighting within their own selves. They are fighting with their own character. All people have chosen behaviors that are totally against what they would have wanted to be. For example, let's say someone has taken up a job that is fundamentally against their values. For example, they believe in a value of life, and then you've gotten a job to do abortion. That will constantly keep impacting your identity, keep impacting your values. And as you get impacted, then you get to a level that you become helpless, because again, what you're feeling is a lot of worthlessness within you. Because when you live your values well, your values will bring a sense of meaning, a sense of contentment. But imagine now every single day you're actually going against your values. So what happens? You feel meaninglessness. And therefore, as you feel the meaninglessness, it is manifested in many other ways. But one, you feel unhappy completely in your life. You may be getting a lot of money from that kind of job, but at the end of it, it ends up, with a lot of unfulfillment, because it is against your values. So some of the choices that we make, it's important to be aware that they can fundamentally go against who we really are as human beings. And once that has happened, then we enter into an existential crisis. And this crisis can only be resolved by by creating values, by creating new meaning, so that you can have a new meaning of your existence. So if you're having some difficulties in your identity, work on it. Work on it. It's possible to change and really get back to your real identity. And if your identity is so messed up, then you can create a new identity as you move on with life. This time around, you're more intentional about it, and it's not identity that is formulated out of painful experiences. Okay? You can be well. Work on yourself.